Hello, today I want to talk about the invisible barriers that can hold you back as a leader. So I want to ask right now, if you are not having the impact and the power to execute in your organization that you want right now, do you know what's holding you back? If you show up in the room, if you're the leader that you have designed yourself to be, and you're not having the impact that you want to have, do you know the barrier that is holding you back? The invisible barriers, because there's several of them, and I want to unpack them today. But I wanted to ask you, if you know what the barrier is, if you feel like you understand what the barrier is that is holding you back, I want you to put it in the comments. I want to see what you think the barrier might be from holding you back from being at the top of the food chain, whatever you determine the top of the food chain is. Because I want to tell you a story, and I'm going to go back in my history a little bit to tell you how I learned what the invisible barriers that were holding me back, and more importantly, what I did to overcome those barriers. See, I think it's incredibly important that we understand that just because you have respect as a leader doesn't necessarily mean that you have the impact that you want to have. See, a lot of people can get respect, but the question is, are you having an impact on the organization? Are you having an impact on the culture? Are you having an impact on the bottom line results that you were hired to do? You might think you are, but there's a chance, a significant chance, that there's some invisible barriers that are keeping you from knowing what you should know, doing what you should do, having the impact that you should be having. So I want you to type into the chat. If you think you know what one barrier might be that's holding you back from maximum impact, from maximum leverage, it might even be holding you back from that promotion that you really want. It might even be holding you back from the ability to determine the outcome in your organization. I'm asking you, do you know what the barrier is? If you do, I want you to type it in the chat. I want you to share it. I want people to see it in the comments if you're bold enough to share that. But I'm going to tell you a story. A long time ago, and when I say a long time ago, nearly 20 years ago, like literally 20 years ago, I ran for elected office. I ran for the South Carolina House of Representatives. In my area, I was a surprise candidate, an upstart candidate, if you will. And I got elected to the legislature. As a matter of fact, I was talking to someone last night that I saw in an airport, and we were talking about how, I was a surprise win, that I won with 53.8% of the vote to get elected, making history in my district. The first African-American in history to ever represent this district. And I know it's Black History Month. I didn't intend to shout out a Black history fact, but I do believe that we make history every day. And I made history on November 4th, 2008, literally 18 years ago, almost 20 years ago. So when I got elected, this is what I want you to know. That by my election, I earned three things that were really important. Number one, I earned the title. That's the first thing that I earned, was the title. Once I got elected, I became Representative Anton Gunn, or State Representative Anton Gunn. And I also earned the title, the Honorable, if you will. The second thing I earned was a seat at the table. See, when you get elected, there's 124 people, and all of us have the same seat at the table. So I got my seat at the table. The third thing that I earned when I got elected was I earned the credibility and the respect. So I got a title, I got the seat at the table, and I got the credibility and respect because I now was in the room, that they had to respect me because I was in the room. So this is probably very similar to you, that when you got hired into your role, you got the title, okay? That gave you a seat at the table in the room. And because you had the title, because you had the seat, then your peers immediately had to give you the credibility and the respect. Those are the things that I earned by just winning, by doing my job of grinding it out and getting in position. I had the title, I had the credibility, I had the respect, I was in the room, and I had the right to be heard. And Dennis, I see you there. You're waiting for alignment before exerting authority. Yeah, I understand that. And we can talk about that a little bit more. I appreciate you dropping it into the comments. So now for everybody else, I want to go back to what I had. Title, credibility, respect, right to be heard, seat at the table in the room. But when I got there was something that I began to see was missing. And when I say missing, this was a barrier that was holding me back. It was seriously holding me back. This barrier was keeping me from having the level of impact that I wanted to have. And Evelyn, I see that you put in the chat that there are many barriers that can hold you back: political culture, lack of resources, budget, envy, many other things. Thank you for sharing that. All of those things are relevant. But let me tell you about the number one thing that was holding me back. I had the title, had the credibility, had the respect, had a seat at the table, was in the room, and had the right to be heard. But the thing that was missing above all else was influence. That's right, influence. Just because you have a title doesn't mean you're influential. Just because you're in a room doesn't mean you're influential. Just because people respect you for your title and your accomplishments doesn't mean that you are influential and that you can influence them. See, I was invited to the meeting. I was in the session. So every day that the legislature got called in, I was invited into the session. When they rang the bell, I was invited into the session. So theoretically, I was invited into the room. When we had committee meetings, I had a committee assignment and I was invited to my committee meetings. But I also had the privilege and the honor of being able to go to any committee meeting. I didn't even have to be on the committee. And I had the credibility and respect enough that if I went to a committee meeting, the staff was going to open the door and put me in the room. So my context is that I was in the room, but I didn't have influence. I was heard. I was at the table, but I really was being ignored. And Dr. McCord, I see your comment here. Do we place an undue burden on ourselves sometimes by believing we have to be better? You could say that for some people, but there are some strict, serious realities that we know we sometimes have to be twice as good, work twice as hard to get half of the credit and a half of the results. That's a reality. But in this context, I had the respect, I had the role, I had the credibility, I had all of those things, but I was missing the influence. And this is what I want you to understand. You can be respected, but that respect doesn't remove the barriers. It actually hides the barriers many times. So let me tell you what those barriers or what respect gets you that sometimes is absent of influence and impact. See, respect gets you in the room, it gets you at the table, and it gets you in the conversation. We all want respect. The bare minimum that we're looking for as an executive is that we want the respect. And that's what I wanted when I was in the room. When I'll never forget the whole budget conversation in 2009. There was we didn't have a lot of money. The resources were slim and we were arguing over dollars, right? And so when you got slim resources, everybody demanded respect. I want resources for this program or this project or for this agency, or I believe we need to protect the veterans. We need to focus on homeowners. We need to focus on kids in schools. Like everybody came to the table with their battle armor on, fighting for their piece of the pie for the constituency or the community that they served. But at the end of the day, if you got 124 people, but you only got 100 pieces, 24 of those people are going to lose out. And so the question becomes, how does somebody lose out? They lose out when they think their respect is just going to carry them all the way to the finish line. The respect is going to carry you in the door, give you the voice, the opportunity, a seat at the table, but you got to learn how to build influence. You got to learn how to build influence. And let me tell you shortly what I had to understand, what I came to understand, that not only helped me in the circumstance when I was serving in the state legislature, but it has been a powerful tool that I've used in every executive role that I've been in. It's how I gain maximum credibility in the C-suite. It's how I gained maximum credibility when I was at the executive table conversation working for the President of the United States at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I'm going to share with you very simply what I think a lot of executive leaders miss when they get mad that I earned my title, I got the credibility, I'm in the room, I'm at the table, I'm in the conversation, I got the respect, so you should just do what I said. You should do, because I know more than you. I'm smarter than you. I went to a better school than you. I got more credentials than you. We say all of these things, or if we don't even say them out loud, we at least think them. Going back to Dr. McCord's comment about, we think we got to be better than other people. So we go back and get an extra degree. We go back and get a new certification. We go and get that doctorate degree. We think all of those titles and accolades are going to give us the influence in the room at the decision-making table. And so to that point, Dr. McCord, you might be right that we sometimes think getting the degree or the credential or the certification or the second degree or the third degree is going to get us over the hump of people seeing us for all that we bring to the table. Sometimes that's true, but many times it's not. See, the thing that I had to learn over time is that when you come into a room, people are going to ask you your perspective. They're going to ask you, what's your thoughts about this? Okay. And you're going to offer those thoughts. They're going to listen. They're going to nod their head, but they're going to move right on and do something different. See, I've seen this like in real time. I'm not talking about stuff that I heard about in a movie or a book or a textbook. I never forget being in the C-suite of a large billion-dollar organization. I'm sitting around the executive table and you got 8 executives in the room. And I remember the CEO putting a problem up. He talked about a challenge that we were having. And literally he wanted to hear from every leader around the table. And every leader started offering their opinion. They started offering their perspective. They were saying, well, this is what I think, or this is what I understand, or this is my idea about that. Like they literally were offering it up. And I'll never forget this circumstance. There was a leader in the room who literally said, I think we should do A. And the CEO said, okay, that's a good thought. Then he went around the room to 2 more people. That person said, I think we should do B. Somebody said, I think we should do C. And the CEO kind of gave the same nod. And then it went to that 4th person. And that 4th person says, well, you know what? I think we should do A. That 4th leader actually repeated what the 1st leader said. The 4th leader had something that 1st leader didn't have, because when the 4th leader said, I think we should do A, you know what the CEO did? The CEO said, that's a great idea. We should do A. So the 1st leader, who happened to be a woman, was sitting there like, didn't I just say that? I said that 15 minutes ago. But it wasn't acknowledged the same way that the 4th leader, who happened to be a man, acknowledged. Now, of course, I'm pointing out there's some gender bias in the conversation, but there was something else in the conversation. this unwritten rule, this unwritten barrier that I learned that I now use whenever I'm in any kind of executive leadership role, which is you got to stop just offering your opinion and you got to start owning the outcome, whatever it is. I'm going to repeat that. You got to stop just offering your perspective or your opinion, because opinions are like, and I don't have to complete the sentence. Y'all know what the rest of that sentence is. You know, opinions are like blank and everybody has one. So you got an opinion, and sometimes people want to hear your opinion. But you know what we want at the executive table more than anything else is a leader who's willing to take ownership of the outcome. So here are the things that I've learned over the years, that when a problem gets posed and people are offering their opinion and their perspective, if it's a perspective and an opinion that you agree with and that you feel like is the right course of direction, then I want you to say the following. Here's what's going to happen if we don't do this, and restate the opinion if it's one that you agree with. Here's what's going to happen if we don't do this. And then secondly, say, I'm willing to take a leadership role and own this to make sure we get the right outcome. Now, I know you think that sounds crazy because you already got too much work to do. You already got too much on your plate. But I want you to understand, when you're at the executive table, that's not an excuse anymore. See, you're in a position of privilege and leadership in the organization. And then when problems get posed, the expectation is that somebody is going to own the outcome to solve the challenge. And so let's say that there's somebody in the room who has a great idea that you actually agree with, but they didn't own the outcome. You need to own the outcome and ask them to partner with you to get it done. That's what you call teamwork. That's what you call leadership, which is own the outcome and find the team to get it done. Now, in another circumstance, you might go around the room and you might not hear no idea that you agree with. And here's what I want you to say. I want you to say, here's what's going to happen if we don't act. And this is what I think we should do. And I'm willing to own this to make sure we get the right outcome. That was the difference for me when I was in the legislature. See, I was offering my opinion, I was offering my idea, I was offering my perspective, but I wasn't offering a way to own the outcome. Now, when you talk about elected office, one of the ways you own the outcome is you introduce the legislation of what outcome you want to achieve. And so I got smart very quickly, very, very quickly, and said, you know what? I'm going to stop going to the microphone to just offer my opinion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go meet with council staff, do the research, put the legislation together, make sure it gets introduced. And then when it gets read across the floor and gets signed to a committee, I'm going to talk about my legislation. And then when it comes back to the floor, I'm going to be the person to explain what the outcome is, but not just do it in solitary confinement, but I'm going to find the right allies, the right partners, the people who I can build influence with, who see the same way that I do and are grateful and happy that I took ownership and introduced it. And so now all they got to do is co-sponsor. They don't have to do all of the work because I did the work. So I appreciate you, Sherrod, Gary, and paying attention and thinking about this perspective. I want you to know that I see far too many executives. I mean, I work with executive teams. I speak at a lot of conferences where I'm hearing leaders come up to me after my presentation. I'm talking about leadership or culture in the organization. And they tell me that there's a problem with the culture in the organization and they don't know what to do about it. And then I say, well, give me a card. Let's follow up, see how I might be able to help. And when they hand me a card, it's always somebody in the C-suite, chief of staff, chief of HR, chief of operations, even the CFO sometimes. They got the title, They got the credibility. They got the respect. But even a CFO feels like they don't have influence over the culture. See, they're at the table and they are not ignored when they're talking about the numbers and about the budget and about the finances, but they're ignored when they're talking about the turnover rate. They're ignored when they talk about leadership development. They're ignored when they're talking about the culture. And the reason why they are ignored is because they're not owning the outcome. They're just offering their opinion. They're offering their perspective. They're offering their insight. But you got to get better at owning the outcome. So I'm going to ask you this. Is this a challenge that you're dealing with? Is this something that you sit at a table with leadership and you get asked for your opinion all of the time, your insights all of the time, because you're respected? They wouldn't dare have the conversation without you because that would be disrespectful. So they respect you by including you into the conversation. But that's where it stops. That's the invisible barrier, is the respect. Because what you're not at that executive table is relied upon. See, you can be respected and not relied upon. See, the people who are reliable at an executive level are the ones who gain the greatest influence. These are the people who don't have a PhD, but they got a GSD. You know what a GSD is? Getting stuff done. And you can sub out the word stuff for something else. They get stuff done. So when you're at the executive table, again, remember the phraseology that I said. That's a great perspective that I agree with wholeheartedly. But here's what's going to happen if we don't act. And I'm willing to take leadership to own this, to make sure we get the outcome that we deserve. Those few words right there might be the difference between you being stuck in the role that you're in and you getting the promotion or the impact that you want to have in your organization. So if this is something that you feel like you need more help with, if you feel like you need some support with, I want you to send me a direct message and type the word barrier in the DM, and then we can talk about what challenge you're having. So send me a DM and use the word barrier so I know what this is about, the barrier, invisible barrier that you might be having in the workplace. You got title, you got credibility, you got respect, you're at the table, you're in the conversation, but you don't have influence because you're just respected and not relied upon. So I would love to hear from you if this is something, feel like this is valuable to you and there's something I can do to help and support you. So I want to thank you for watching Leadership Live. I'm going to spend the next month diving into some of the challenges that executive leaders are having, the ones that I see real time. Like I was just with an executive team 2 days ago, and there were some real challenges that were raised that I'm going to talk about this month to help you to navigate them, because I believe you deserve to have the impact, to have the influence, and most importantly, build the legacy that outlasts your role and your career where you are. And I want to show you how to get there. And the first one is you got to understand how to get across this invisible barrier of respect, how to go from being just respected to relied on as a senior leader. I want to thank y'all for watching. Appreciate your comments. Keep them coming. Everybody have a fantastic day.